back in session after our closed session on collective bargaining negotiations, and we will proceed with council comments. I'd like to start by noting that the Tacoma Park Folk Festival, the 29th annual Tacoma Park Folk Festival, was yesterday, and it was beautiful weather. I saw several members of the organizing committee and told them they must be living right because it was a beautiful day and there was a very good turnout. I didn't see any final attendance numbers, but I noticed it did have a very good turnout, and I'm sure it was quite a successful festival. They also tried some new ideas. One of them was to have sort of a candidates speaker's corner on one side of the school and a section of the sidewalk along that side where candidates could get booths or simply stand there and talk to people. And I thought that worked well, too. It worked well both because there were people who walked up and down talking to the various candidates, and if people had already made up their minds, they could simply avoid that section. Although nothing, obviously, the Folk Festival would certainly not attempt to prohibit free speech, and candidates and their supporters were free to walk around the festival also. So I think it was a very nice festival. They had good turnout, and you know, talking to some of the people who were coming to the Folk Festival who hadn't been there before, were very surprised at how large it was, and it's probably one of Tacoma Park's better known events. Probably more people know Tacoma Park from the Folk Festival than from almost anything else. So many congratulations and thanks to the Folk Festival Committee and all the volunteers. I know there were at least 2 council members who were doing volunteer stuff, and they let me introduce Tacoma Zone, which is one of our own musical groups. So many thanks to everyone. Anything else? Yeah, Terry and then Colleen.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Joyce and I were at the Folk Festival yesterday, and I think the Folk Festival each year gets better. I think it was bigger and better this year than ever before. A lot of people came. It was a lot of variety of vendors there and a lot of variety of entertainment. Really enjoyed it. But as this event has grown, there's a problem with parking that I know on Ritchie Avenue. It became very problematic yesterday because it was only possible to have traffic in one direction. And I would ask that our police department work with the organizers of the Folk Festival so that next year we either have indications that it's a one-way street or that we only have parking on one side of the street so that cars can pass. Unfortunately, everyone was not in a festive mood when they got head-to-head and couldn't move on the street, and it took some negotiations to get one of the parties to move, and of course there were a lot of other parties behind him at that point. For those who like smaller events, the Tacoma Park Community Action Group, which is a new organization, a group of residents from Maple Avenue area, are going to be holding the Maple Avenue Culture Fair next Saturday. That's Saturday the 16th from 11 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. And they're going to have various entertainers and also a few vendors and some food vendors also. So I think people ought to stop by and see some of the various cultures from the Maple Avenue neighborhood on display. That's from 11 till 3 on Saturday the 16th. Thank you.
Colleen?
Last week I made a couple of comments about my mom coming to live with me in May and how we would have to have a Tacoma Park contract bridge group. And I was really kind of kidding and teasing the recreation director a little bit, but it wasn't but 24 hours later, I think, when I got home and I had a call from a Tacoma Park staff person who's the senior coordinator, and I got to learn all about the senior services that are offered and was very impressed. And I thought it was another good example of how responsive the city staff is, that they would actually call me to ask about it. So I signed my mom up to help the director coordinate a new card-playing program for senior citizens when she arrives. But I thought it was great because I got this call and learned all about all the different senior services, and we had this great conversation about issues around serving food to the seniors and the senior room, and I learned all about the different programs and the computer programs and everything, so it was great. Well, good. I'll have to tease the directors more often.
Any other comments? Okay. We don't have any other agenda items, but we are, I believe, dropping off item number 4, which is the first reading of the pilot program agreement, because I understand that the folks from Montgomery Housing Partnership will not be able to be here this evening, and they would rather postpone it. So we will be dropping that item off the agenda. We have also in front of us, actually they're listed on the agenda, 3 sets of minutes. One of them was a bit later than the others, and I didn't get a chance to read it, so I'm going to ask the council to consider adoption only of the July 10th and July 24th minutes.
Move adoption.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All those in favor of adopting those 2 sets of minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are adopted. The next item on the agenda is a public comment period, and that is the time that's allocated for comments on items that are not on our regular meeting agenda. That would include either items on our work session agenda or other items that the public wishes to bring before the council. I would ask when you come up to the podium if you would identify yourself and also if you would keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, my name's Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue. And you know today is the 5th anniversary of 9/11 when
Yes.
we had all that bombing in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, those 4 airliners. One thing I'd like to ask is I think people should, instead of just reflecting on the deaths of all that, we should reflect on what we can do to make our city a better city and a safer city for our neighbors, our elderly, and our people in our city. What we can do to promote nonviolence instead of violence, and also what we can do when we use our rights. Like for tomorrow is our right to vote. Everybody, when they think about 9/11, they should pledge to get out there tomorrow and vote. Vote with a conscience, vote for peace, vote for what you can do to make your city, your council, in your country a better place. For example, tomorrow is a primary election. A lot of people say, my vote don't count. The primary is not important. Well, the primary, I feel, is one of the most important elections. It's putting your candidate on the ballot. And people should be taught that in school and outside of school. We've got to educate our kids and educate everybody. And also tomorrow, we should also enjoy our chance to vote, our chance to campaign. I had a great time this summer, you know, out there campaigning for Jamie Raskin and out there doing a lot of civil rights and peace activities. It's very, very enjoyable being a citizen of America when you want to be, and a citizen of Tacoma Park, and making my city a better place. I enjoy doing that very much, and I think if everybody out there got to do the same thing, they'd enjoy it. And now I'd like to give a little jingle, and you know, because this is part of being an American and being a vote and everything else. And it goes like this. Ida Rubin, I've been thinking what a great state this will be when the voters of District 20 give Jamie Raskin victory. Now, one question I have to ask, and I'm just curious. I cannot see, but I'm sure I can find out. How many people on this council are supporting Jamie Raskin? I am curious. Can they raise their hands, please? And maybe somehow I can get the answer in Braille. Please, can everybody who's supporting Jamie Raskin on this election raise their hands? And also the viewers out there, I want you to come out
two
and
people
vote.
who raised their hands that I could see.
How many?
I think there are 2 people who I could see raising their hands.
Well, that's great, but I'd like to see everybody, whoever they're voting for, come out and exercise your right to vote, for God's sake, because voting is very important. You have a chance to bring our troops home. Get out there and march for what you want. No one's going to give it to you. No one's going to just give it to you if you don't ask for it. You want to get your people on city council, get out there and vote for them. Get out there and help them do their jobs after they get voted in. The same thing with your Senate, the same thing with your House of Delegates. Get out there and vote for the ones you want. Get out there, and you can't complain if you do not vote. Voting is very important. Get out there and vote. Thank you very much. Be a good American and vote.
Thank you, Pat. Actually, we do, in fact, have a resolution commemorating September 11th with a request that people do something meaningful on that day. So you were very prescient in making that comment. I also
Peace and nonviolence, too.
I also want to second the comments that you made about the importance of voting, all except for one minor point, and that is that I believe that you can be equally patriotic in supporting Senator Rubin, who's done many things for Tacoma Park over many years.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sometimes we want to change, too.
Yes.
Everybody, come on up and vote on Tuesday. Primary time to vote.
Yes.
I'm Tom Chris from 8326 Roanoke. I'd just like to thank the council for having this session where I could take a few minutes to comment. I have two comments I want to make concerning the operation of the Tacoma Park Rec Center on New Hampshire Avenue. I'd just like to ask the city to reconsider. On September 5th, they changed the policy to where the weight room is only open at 2:30 in the afternoons. And for someone like me, the early afternoons and late mornings are quite valuable because after that the kids kind of take over, and it's hard. I mean, it's a small weight room anyway, so it doesn't serve very many people. So I'd just like to ask the city to reconsider that. The other thing has to do with the scheduled change in the price of a membership card, which is scheduled to go up to $85 for residents on January 2007. It was just raised this past July to $50. That's a 70% raise. And if you consider the raise that was made in July, it's going to be about a 100% raise in 1 year. I'd just like to ask the city to reconsider that. If the problem is money over there, I would suggest to you that the raise is probably not going to raise much money anyway, because they don't check for membership cards at the rec center. People just wander in and out at will, and I don't see how that is going to actually help the city to raise much more money. Part of it is that they don't check for cards when you walk in, but part of it is the back doors are all open, and people wander in and out at will through the back doors. They have alarms on them, but none of the alarms work, and the citizens know that, the people that know that. So if the problem is money, you're not going to raise money that way, and I would ask the city to reconsider its policies in that regard.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if we could ask the Deputy City Manager to follow up on the issue of the not checking the ID cards and the doors being open. The council actually did have a discussion, and it did express some concerns about the reduction in the hours. We were told by the Recreation Director that it was very expensive to pay a person to keep the facility open, because we have to pay somebody the whole time that the facility is open, given the amount of usage that it got during the day. And I think where we're going at this point is we're going to do this for a short period of time and see what happens.
Okay. There is an additional problem as well, in that with the back doors being open, equipment disappears. And
Yes.
I've been going to the place for a little over a year and a half now. And a few months ago, there was a pair of dumbbells that just disappeared. And then this past week, one of the pins for one of the weight machines disappeared, and then the pull-down bar on another machine, which makes the machine pretty much useless. People just walk away with that stuff.
We definitely
And the
need
bar
to,
is like this long. I mean, you can't just hide that in a bag.
yeah, we need to follow up on those things. And I appreciate your bringing that to our attention. That sounds like something we need to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, we will move on to the next item, which is the city manager's comments. And of course, sitting in for the city manager who is out of town, we have the deputy city manager.
I have no report tonight.
Okay.
No updates.
Okay. Well, moving right along here, I think we're a bit ahead of our time here, but what? I was going to say, but we do have the first individual who was to be interviewed here. Mike Israel is up for an interview for the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee reappointment. Yeah, why don't you just come in and sit up at the table here. And we do have the information that you sent to the city clerk. And you've been on the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee for, I think, has it been 3 years or 2 years now? But some period of time. And
3 years, I was appointed interim and then reappointed once.
Okay. So I don't know if there's something you'd like to share with us in terms of what the committee's been doing, or something that you've been doing on the committee, or some direction you'd like the committee to go.
Well, I've only been a resident of Tacoma Park 4 years. I moved here from New Jersey upon my retirement. I was an academic criminologist, and that's the expertise I bring to the committee. When it comes to things like fire safety and homeland security, I'm just a regular citizen. But when it comes to crime, I mean, I have a career of reading and experiences, and it brings, you know, I think I bring something to the table. My wife bought me a T-shirt, and across the T-shirt is the words, "Everyone is entitled to my opinion." Well, you're entitled to my opinion. So, I mean, there's some things which I don't have an opinion. Some things I do. I mean, the central question which we'll have to deal with is whether or not there should be a Tacoma Park independent full-service police department. And I don't really have an opinion on that yet. There's pros and cons, and it's not going to be my call, but it might be able to contribute to focusing the issue to some extent. But since I have your attention for a moment, I would like to express an opinion. After a career of reading, and I was an academic who did not spend my life in my office, I got into the street. And in the 4 years that I've lived here, I've been out a bit, I've gotten around. And I think that one of the things I bring to the table is that I can see a myth when I can identify a myth when I see one. And I think that there's a myth that's encompassing us, and that's the myth of the dangerousness of gangs in Montgomery and Prince George's County. Gangs are a concern, there are gangs, but the danger is highly exaggerated. There's an anti-gang task force because there's money for an anti-gang task force, but I don't think that's where the resources ought to go, and I don't think that's where the focus ought to go. Although I will say this, the people on the task force say intelligent things, and one of the things they say is that there ought to be education and prevention as well as law enforcement. But part of the educational component ought to be to educate non-gang. You know, what they're talking about is educating potential gang members about not joining gangs. But there's another part of that education, especially for young people. They ought to educate non-gang members that gang members aren't necessarily as menacing as they may appear. One of the witnesses at a hearing in Tacoma Park about a week ago on the anti-gang task force said that the major gang in this area, which is the Salvadorian gang MS-13, is dedicated to violence. In my opinion, I'm only giving you my opinion, but it is a somewhat informed opinion, that's a myth, that's an inaccuracy. They're not dedicated to violence, they're dedicated to what they call respect. And in order to get what they think is respect, which they don't get elsewhere, and that's why they joined the gang, there's a swagger, there's an arrogance, there's a certain menacing demeanor about them. But that doesn't mean that they're equally dangerous. Sometimes there are problems. Law enforcement ought to be aware of them. Sometimes the harmony breaks down. But in my opinion, the gangs prevent crime more than they cause crime. They provide solidarity. They sometimes settle disputes among themselves. They have ways to negotiate disputes. It's when these negotiations break down that violence occurs. I mean, if I had my way, there wouldn't be a $2 million piece of federal pork to deal with gangs. There would be a $2 million piece of federal pork to deal with guns. Guns is the problem, and that's something which we're not spending enough attention to. I've seen the crime statistics for the United States in 2005, and there's a spike of violent crimes with guns, especially robberies. And that's the issue, and I don't think we really know that. There's, by and large, law-abiding citizens who buy guns and who go through the Brady background check and who obey the laws don't use them illegally. But somehow or other, and I don't think law enforcement knows this, guns get into the hands of juvenile delinquents and criminals and are used in crimes. As I read the Tacoma Park blotter, too often I see of armed robberies with a gun, and nobody knows where that gun comes from. And that's where I think we ought to focus our energy if I had my way, which I don't, but I'm just expressing my opinion on that. Gangs aren't the problems, guns are the problem.
Well, I certainly agree with you about the issue of guns, and we have tried to address this in sort of a small way. We're a very small jurisdiction in terms of what municipalities are allowed to do. I am interested in your ideas and your expertise on the gang issue, though. I think one of the things that the city has promoted is this intervention idea where, like the Crossroads Youth Opportunity Center, which offers services for young people, and its clientele is sort of defined as young people at risk. And I don't know how you predict how someone is involved in will get involved in a gang or not. I don't notice that the programs that they offer are necessarily attempting to scare people about gangs. I know that they do bring gang members into the program and get them working with each other. And so I see that, you know, whether you think that gangs are a major problem or not, certainly the services offered at a youth opportunity center is a good thing to do.
Well, it's a lot better than assuming that they're law-breaking and assuming it's a law enforcement problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's successful or not, but it's well-intentioned.
And I don't see sort of a downside to offering services to young people, whether they join a gang or not. They certainly are at risk of either committing crimes or having crimes committed against them. So I do think that those kinds of things, those kinds of services are important. But I appreciate your point of view, and I think, Mike, one of the things that you've brought to the committee has been your academic expertise, which often gives you a more reasoned viewpoint on a lot of issues than some of us who perhaps don't have those academic credentials, and I very much appreciate that. Is there any questions?
I had the opportunity after my time on the TASI committee to attend a lot of the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee meetings, and Mike was there and always had very interesting and thought-provoking things to say, as tonight, his comments about the gangs. And so I'm really happy to see that you're...
Should have worn my T-shirt.
I'm really happy to see that you're interested in continuing to serve on the committee, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions or comments? Well, thank you. We appreciate your being here, and I very much appreciate your interest in continuing on the committee.
All right, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I don't see our next folks that we're interviewing here, so maybe we will go a little bit out of order and take up the first item on the regular meeting agenda, and then if we see Diana or Alice, we will go ahead and do the Arts and Humanities Commission interviews. The next item is, as Pat Lovelace spoke about, a resolution which designates September 11th as a day of service, charity, and compassion. Bruce, do you want to introduce that?
Yeah, I'd like to move that resolution.
Okay, it's been
And
moved
if I can
seconded.
just give you a little background, one of my constituents brought this to my attention, and I thought it would be a good thing to do. And I want to point out that even though today is the 11th and the day is drawing to a close, this resolution expresses the hope that everyone will mark September 11th every year and recognize it as a day of voluntary service, charity, and compassion. And one of the things that brought this about was, which you'll see in the packet, mygooddeed.org, which was when people wanted to remember 9/11 but weren't sure what to do, so they wanted to come up with a constructive option and a way to formally express their sympathy and honor those who gave so much on that day. And so you can visit the group's website, mygooddeed.org, and post your plans if you come up with any plan, and also find ideas on resources on things that you might want to do. And some of the national partners for this program include the American Red Cross, the Points of Light Foundation, Habitat for Humanity, Youth Service America, Goodwill Industries, Citizen Corps, and the Hands On Network. and I think it would be good for us to publicize this and let people know that there's some options for things that they might do.
I thank you, Bruce, for bringing this to our attention. There has been a lot of recognition of the 5th anniversary of September 11, and I think that there's been a lot of emphasis on, there was a piece in the paper on Sunday about memorials, physical memorials for victims, which I think are very appropriate. But I think there's something very Tacoma Park about this notion that the best way to honor the individuals who lost their lives on that day is to do something to make the world a better place. And I think this is very consistent with the kinds of ideals that many people in Tacoma Park hold, and I'm very pleased that we have the opportunity to do this. Certainly the people who are volunteering for our city committees are one example of many people in Tacoma Park who do put a lot of time and effort into doing the right thing. You know, people who work for, you know, nonprofit organizations, who do policy work, all those kinds of folks are trying to make the world a better place. And I think that this is an extremely appropriate thing and very consistent with a lot of the ideals of the Tacoma Park community, and I appreciate it, Bruce. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Yeah, I would just like to expand on what Mayor Porter said, and that you know, doing something for the community is important, not just for the community and for the volunteer themselves, but for the larger community, for the country itself. And I think it's very timely that this resolution comes before us tonight, not only because it's September 11th, but also because tomorrow is the election day. And although it's the primary election, it is in this area because it is predominantly a Democrat neighborhood. It is probably the most important, at least as important as the general election. And one way that people could reach out and do a good deed that is really related, I think, to the events that happened in 2001 on September 11th, and that is to not only go to the polls and vote yourself, but also to encourage your neighbors, help your neighbors, help them understand who the candidates are, and maybe even help them get to the polls. It's a small way that you can contribute in a large way to the community. And it's I think it's in the spirit of this resolution for people to do that tomorrow. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Are there any public comments on this resolution?
Yes, my name's Pat Lovelace again, 7620 Maple Avenue. I would also like to see on that resolution, you know, also to see if people could pledge nonviolence. Instead of wanting revenge on Iraq and revenge on Iran and every other Arab country for what happened, and if you know, as you know, Iran and Iraq had nothing to do with it. We also should pledge for the people who are still losing their lives as a result of 9/11 to try and pledge nonviolence and to try and keep their minds clear of drugs so that they can be useful. The schools should be encouraged to teach the kids, as you know, as part of a remembrance of the ones lost in 9/11, is not to become lost themselves in the quagmire of crack cocaine and methamphetamine and other drugs, and to try and make themselves a better person so they can become more adept in making our country a better place to live and our world a better place to live. And we got to realize that we got to respect the rights of Muslims and other people that we don't know much about. Let us become educated on them in school. Let us teach our people that we are all equal and live on this planet together, and pledge nonviolence and clean their minds up so they can become better people. See if we can put that on the resolution. And we can also send this resolution to other cities and other states so they can do the same thing. Thank you very much.
I don't know if Bruce has a response to that, but I do notice that in the resolve clause and also in the title, in addition to service and charity, compassion is mentioned. And I think that the comments that you made are encompassed within the notion of compassion.
But also education, too.
I think there's actually some reference to that in the resolution itself.
Making ourselves a better person, cleaning their minds up.
Sure.
So they can become a more useful citizen.
Right.
Because they're not very useful if they're messed up on drugs.
Did you have any comments that you wanted to make, Bruce?
Just that there's the one whereas clause that says it's a fitting and essential to establish a lasting, meaningful, and positive legacy and of tribute and service for future generations to come. And I think that, as a general language, incorporates Pat's concerns.
Okay. Are there any other comments? All right, seeing nothing else, the resolution is before the council. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution passes. The next item on the agenda, I see that Alice Sims is here. Maybe we should just go very quickly back to, we're running a bit ahead of our agenda. So it maybe, do you want to come up here and we can...
I spoke with her yesterday. I know she's coming. Has she already come?
No, she has not. So do you want to wait until she gets here? Or would you want us to...
I'm going to stay on till later anyway for
Okay.
Emily.
Okay.
Arts and Humanities Commission.
All right, so
Whatever suits you.
why don't we wait until Diana gets here, and then we'll do the interview with you all. And I know, I mean, we put it on this evening specifically because we are hearing from the Arts and Humanities Commission also. Okay, so we will move on to the second reading of the FY07 Budget Amendment Number 1.
There's one change since the first reading, and that's there's a provision to carry over a portion of the unexpended FY06 monies to 07 for the CSAFE program, Montgomery County funds.
And that was explained in the cover sheet.
Yes.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the council?
Move the ordinance.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any council comments on the ordinance at second reading? Any public comments on the ordinance? All right, seeing none, this is the second reading of the ordinance, so will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter.
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane. Aye. Councilmember Barry. Aye. Councilmember Clay.
Aye.
Councilmember Elrich. Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember Williams.
Aye.
The ordinance passes at second reading. The next item is a resolution, ordinance, awarding a contract for a social worker, and it awards the contract to Identity, Inc. for a part-time clinical social worker for CSAFE.
Single reading, since you just put the money in the budget, so
Right.
we only need one reading. And Mary can tell you about the project.
Sure. What CSAFE proposes to the City Council is to award a contract to Identity to hire a part-time clinical social worker that will work with gang-involved youth, that will provide mental health services to gang-involved youth. And the amount of the contract will be no more than $21,000, and the funds are already in the FY07 budget.
Okay. And I think consistent with Mike Israel's comments, this is not necessarily contingent on these young people being in gangs. These are youth at risk. Is that correct?
These are youth at risk and also those that are involved in gang that live in the CSAFE area. And the clinical social work will be housed at the Crossroads Youth Opportunity Center.
Okay.
It's for them and their families.
And the families? Okay. Are there other questions?
Where's the Youth Opportunity Center?
It's at Suite 411, 7676 New Hampshire Avenue.
Yes.
Have you identified someone yet for this?
Yes, Identity has identified a part-time clinical social worker.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the council? Yes, Colleen?
So these are the bids to hire a social worker?
Those are the quotes.
I didn't think this would happen to me so soon, but I seem to have developed my father's ideas about spending money. Wow, this seems like a lot of money. $175 for the initial assessment, $60 an hour, $95 to $150 an hour,
Well, we're going with the Identity bid, not that one.
which is $70 an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
Just because they're a licensed clinical social worker.
Right. And this is happening at our facility?
This will be happening in the Crossroads Youth Opportunity Center.
It's the same person that's going to do all of the work, or they're having people rotating through, or? how
It'll
do-
be the same person.
The same person, okay.
The Crossroads Youth Opportunity Center is a an office that is funded with funds from both Montgomery and Prince George's County.
Right.
And it provides a variety of services to youth at risk. This would only be one of the services, and it's sort of a one-stop shop for those kinds of services. And I think this is an important addition to the kinds of services that are already provided. And I believe Identity provides other services at the center also.
Yes, they do. They also provide job skills training. They provide,
Job skills training.
Yes, they provide mental health services. They provide recreational activities, other kinds of social skills building activities.
So perhaps one reason that their per-hour cost is lower is because they already have an administrative entity in place, and so presumably they don't have to set one up just for this. Identity, Inc. also has fairly strong roots in the Latino community, and since many of the young people who use the service are Latino, not all of them, but many of them are, I think Identity also has that going for them.
Typically, what kind of services do they provide, and on what model do we base the social service intervention as an effective one in these instances?
Okay. There have been various studies done to prove that mental health support is very effective in the rehabilitation of children or youth involved in involved in gangs, or those youth who are already involved in gangs, especially because of the post-traumatic stress that they face when they come into this country. Or a lot of times there's been a separation between the parents and the youth, and then the youth come into this community, and then there's a disconnect between them and their parents. And then they just need to feel welcomed into somebody's family, and they don't feel that way in their own. So therefore, by providing them with these mental health services, they learn how to deal with that post-traumatic stress that's been caused by the separation. So I don't know if I've exactly answered your question.
There's like a treatment plan then that's developed, and typically how many hours of a social worker's time would a typical family, if there is such a thing, need of their service?
Well, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question to, because I'm not a clinical social worker. But the plan is that this person on CSAFE funds will work for approximately 8 hours a week. But there are other funds that Identity has identified that they would partner with this funding. So the person would actually work full-time. The clinical social worker would. So how long does a clinical social worker actually need to work with somebody in order to rehabilitate them? I think that depends on each individual.
And I think it's worth pointing out that this is not the same kind of mental health services that, say, would be provided by a psychiatrist where someone has a serious mental illness. This is more people who have difficulties relating to other individuals, and it sounds like particularly family members, to work on those interpersonal relationships.
Thank you, Mayor. Tacoma Park recently recorded its 4th homicide within the city limits, which I think is more than we've ever had in the past. And that was the homicide that occurred over there within the boundary of the CSAFE area that you were working with. Do you know if that was gang-related? And you might not be the best person to ask, but I just thought you might have heard whether that was gang-related or not.
I'm not the best person to ask.
Okay.
I think I read in the SNI report from Carol Bannerman.
The information is that I have from the police department that it is gang-related, both the victim and the perpetrators are members of the gang.
So I think that gang violence is worrisome, and maybe contrary to what we heard earlier this evening, it's something that I think it's important that we address. We be out on the leading edge of trying to provide services to the potential members of gangs, and so I support this resolution.
Well, I would say it's significant from what we heard earlier that we're talking about intervention before people get involved in gangs. I've had 2 kids who came and lived with me as teenagers after they'd been involved in gangs, and for both of them, you know, the damage was in fact kid on kid within the gang, and it wasn't that a lot of the activities that happened spilled outside to people who weren't involved with the gang. But I think the other really striking thing is that the only way that they could get away from the gang without being hurt themselves, they basically couldn't exist in the same area where they had previously been involved in the gang and had to make significant moves, more than 50 miles in both cases and 100 miles in one of the cases. So I think it's certainly worthwhile to stop it before it starts, because you can't really go back in the same community once you've gone down that path.
Mary, while we've got you here on the hot seat, we heard earlier that the hours of the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center have been reduced because of data that shows the usage of the center is falling. I think we need to take a closer look at those numbers because I'd like to reconfirm them and make sure that in fact is the case. Would you venture an opinion on the extent to which your program might be able to make use of that, more use of that facility and the work that you do at the towers, for example, to help us get those numbers up, given that the area has a considerable number of at-youth risk? Certainly there are some of them in that apartment building which serves the recreation facility. Can you help us? Can you envision a way in which the city might contribute to the gang suppression issue and the rehabilitation of these young people by making more use of that facility?
Well, what we've done in the past in the towers is we have organized a community group and more or less facilitated an action planning meeting with them so that they can identify their needs and then develop a plan to address those needs at the community level. And one of those needs was, of course, to provide more services for the youth. And the best people to say what those services would be, of course, would be the youth themselves or the community members who interact with them daily. So that is definitely a part of our future plan, to continue to work with the community group at the towers. And when we have our meetings at the rec center, I definitely use the rec center for a lot of meetings. But as far as encouraging the youth to use that center, of course, in any kind of action plan development, ideally the youth center or the Tacoma Park Rec Center would be incorporated into that. But that will have to come after we have our meetings, and then the community as a whole decides how they want to use it.
I got an idea for it. YMCA Embarcadero in San Francisco decided to use their meeting facility area between 9 and noon or 1 as a youth second chance high school, because the kids kind of wanted to come in and work out and use the swimming pool and the equipment, and it was when they should have been in school, and so they set up basically an alternative education program that catered to those kids' needs who had already dropped out of school, and put it together and funded it. They got some money from the state, but it was a great use, and they got to participate in the center, and it was an extremely successful model.
Well, I believe we're going to be following up with the Recreation Director on related issues anyway, so those are both good things to make note of and bring them up at the appropriate time. Does anyone else have any questions about this proposed contract? Okay. Does someone want to move it?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any public comments on this ordinance? All right. Since this is a single reading ordinance, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter.
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane. Councilmember Berry. Councilmember Clay.
Aye.
Councilmember Elrich. Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember Williams.
Aye.
The ordinance passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that by jumping ahead of our schedule, we've sort of messed up other people's schedules, and apologies to you. But I see that both Diana and Alice are here, so why don't we just go ahead and do that interview right now. We've got the information that you both have sent us. You're both sitting members of the Arts and Humanities Commission. And I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to tell us. Maybe we'll start with Diana and then to Alice and see if there's anything you'd like to tell us about what you're doing, would like to do, whatever.
Well, I would like to say that I have really enjoyed being on this commission because it brings together people that don't normally come in through the other communities. If I work with school people, and so this is a different crowd, and they're all experts in their own pieces, and so it's, I think, been a great group of people. For me personally, one of the things that I've been able to do is wear several hats at the same time. So I do Historic Commission, Historic Tacoma, and I do The Voice, and I'm interested in the schools, and it's a place to bring all that together. In particular, I've been doing the calendar in The Voice, which has been trying to focus locally and giving us a starting point or a rallying point for putting together a cultural directory. And The Voice is willing to help actually host that. They do other very similar things with community organizations. So I'm sort of looking forward to continuing to do that.
Well, I'm very glad to hear you say that. That's one of the things that we were trying to do, and I'm very pleased that in your opinion that we seem to have succeeded in that. Thank you. Alice?
Well, I'm more of a doer than a rider, so I'm very happy now that we seem to be, getting dirty and doing things. I served on the Sidewalk Committee, and I served on the Poet Laureate Committee, and I led the Exhibitions Committee, and I kind of helped. We now have an exhibitions director who's going to oversee exhibitions, although I'm still very interested in that, and we'll keep, looking for artists, as do all the commissioners. It's a wonderful group of people working together, diverse but dedicated. What I'm interested in next is working on a mural in the parking lot, or a series of murals in the parking lot, and finding artists and funding, and to begin that project, to begin, helping with the other commissioners on that project. But I'd like to see something like that, happen slowly over time, maybe even in sections, a section 1 year, a section another year, section another year. So I would like to continue to work on these things.
That's a very good idea. I remember having an opportunity to listen to a previous discussion with that and thought it was a great idea then, too. And you've mentioned a number of great things that the Arts and Humanities Commission has done, and I know you both have been instrumental in getting those things done.
We are especially proud of this exhibits because that's probably the most visible thing that Arts and Humanities has done, is everybody who walks in the building who now sees art on the walls, and we really have Alice to thank for that.
Yes.
It was a lot of help.
Yeah. But
Any other comments? Terry?
Yeah, it's ridiculous for me to sit here and ask you questions.
You're not
both
gonna
have been
know
such
us.
great. You both have been such great contributors to the city. Whether on the Arts and Humanities Commission or not. So I can't think of any questions to ask that would affect how I would vote on this resolution or the potential appointment when it does come back before us. But I do have a question. I know, Alice, you, I think it was 6 months ago, you were working on putting tiles as a splash across the back of the counter in the art room, and that was great. It brought together various community members to paint individual tiles, and then yeah, it was laid out nicely, and we got them installed. But I know at that time, after the installation, that we had talked about maybe having additional tiles to finish the the wall underneath the counters so it would have a finished appearance. And in fact, I think even some of the tile work has not been completed. The grouting hasn't been completed in expectation of more tiles. Could you tell me what the status is of that?
I have, it's funding. I think Deborah was worried about funding at the time. There are people who want to do it. I want to do it. Someone was speaking to me today about adding some mosaics up there, but it's a matter of funding, and that's,
My recollection.
I haven't forgotten it. I just,
thank you. My recollection is that the funding that you were seeking for that is under $500, or in the neighborhood of $500, and that included installation and firing and all of that. Yeah.
It's really a nice project because we have the kiln now, you know, in this part of the city, and yes, and you helped with the installation, so we could do something with that.
Mr. Hobbs, I wonder if maybe we could get an answer on that funding. It's been like 6 months. Thank you.
Doug had a question, then Colleen.
We got fired up last week a little bit when some folks from the Old Town Business Association made a presentation to us, and the theme was how to re-energize Old Town and how to pull in more visitors from outside Tacoma Park. And then I read a separate item that Silver Spring is now being designated as an arts mecca or center, and I'm thinking, well, we ought to be designated that. We have the Folk Festival every year. We have the opera rehearsal facilities just across the border there. We have the old theater on the district side. We have Liz Lerman dance group. We have all of these fabulous artists here. Why can't we imagine ourselves as an arts center? And why can't we, in terms of the commission and the Downtown Business Association and others, get together and talk about what we might need in order to bring these separate threads together? Wonder if you could comment on that.
Emily Powers, who's the fearless leader with the Arts and Humanities Commission, you're going to speak with her later.
We are actually having a full presentation from the entire Arts and Humanities.
And so that we can
There are only two commissioners who think I think it's a good idea, but it's more of a group. I think you should talk to the
We're doing the interviews at this point, and then we're going to have a time shortly, another agenda item shortly after this, to talk to the Arts and Humanities Commission, and more broadly.
I think there's a piece of the answer to that in that designation as an arts district is some sort of political official designation, and the woman now in charge of Silver Spring Downtown, I think there's a person who actually has shepherded that, or I'm not quite sure how the political arrangement worked, but I think...
The only thing I can add to it is when I got on the council and was interested in what Tacoma Park could do that's new and different, is we did explore the idea of becoming an arts district, but apparently it's for areas where there are large vacant warehouses, and we just don't have that in Old Town. So we can be glad that we don't qualify in some ways, but Silver Spring on Fenton and where the Giant Bakery is, that area is really where there's the vacancy and the opportunity for the economic development tool, which the Arts District is.
We could make our own designation.
Yes, we could. We need our own commission.
It's called marketing.
Work it through Main Street. I don't think there's any reason why we can't create a designation for ourselves, whether or not it fits the county-state parameters.
Can I suggest that before we get too far down this, I would agree that that's a very interesting idea. Before we get too far down this road, let's finish up with the interviews of these two commissioners and then allow the other members of the Arts and Humanities Commission to participate in that particular discussion. Terry.
Thank you. Since I asked Alice an unrelated question to the interview, I'm going to take the privilege of asking Diana one, too. You know, recently I talked with you and was surprised to hear that the Old Town Business Association was not working with the Adventist Church in Old Town to try to leverage and take advantage of the holiday celebration, the Christmas celebration that the Adventist Church is going to be putting on in Old Town. And I think now the Old Town Business, or Old Tacoma Business Association is now working with Pastor De Silva to see how that we could maybe have a wider celebration, not just of Christmas, but of the holiday season in the business district. But I think that that's a project that the Arts and Humanities Commission could be very helpful with. And I'm just curious if you've yet had a chance to talk with anyone in the Old Tacoma Business Association?
I connected, I initially talked to Pastor De Silva because of my Historic Tacoma hat. He was talking about it. The emails went back and forth last week between John Hume and Roz at OTB and Pastor De Silva. So that's sort of in the works. But there also, I think, is a piece of this that's kind of arts and humanities.
Exactly.
Because this is why we need an Arts and Humanities Commission, because there's a lot of pieces that there isn't anyone kind of a little bit over it, making sure that all of these people talk to each other. And this is one example. I assume the council knows that between the 15th of December and the 25th of December, there will be a live nativity across from Pizza Movers in the parking lot next to the church offices on Eastern. He's expecting thousands of people each night. Technically, it's in D.C., but it is on the edge of Old Town, and he says anything, he's willing to do anything and everything to cooperate with the merchants, so we have to take him up on it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about
And
that.
the studio tour is a big part of that.
We're planning a studio tour, an artist studio tour, and a holiday sale of artists who would like to sell their work in the municipal center, the community center. To dovetail with that, Lucinda, what's Lucinda's last name? She's on the commission. Duggar. She's working on that. So we are planning on having some dovetailing activities while that's going on.
It's hard for me to express how huge I think that opportunity is for the city, not just for the businesses in the Old Town area, but for the city at large, to have both a festive time during that period of that 1 week or period of time, but also to really make Tacoma Park noticed, and it's a chance to decorate the area, and not necessarily to celebrate one particular religion, but to have a festive spirit during the holidays, and to showcase the businesses, the arts, the humanities, everything, and work in conjunction with our neighbors in D.C.
And working with the Adventists, which is sometimes kind of falls by the wayside.
Someone needs to take the leadership role in bringing the different entities together, and I plead with you, as I have with other people, to for someone to step forward and do that.
Well, at least the contacts are talking back and forth.
Good.
Bruce and then Joy.
Yeah, I just want to go back real quickly to something Alice mentioned earlier about the potential mural project out here, and it reminded me of potential mural projects other places, including, I believe, over in Colleen's ward near New Hampshire Avenue at Prince George or somewhere over there, and I didn't know what the status of that is, or any others similar to that in terms of thinking about potential mural projects.
It's always funding. We're trying to figure, I think there are artists who would like to do it, and it's how to figure out to make it into sizable amounts so that we can pay the art, be able to raise some funds, and where will we raise the funds? And if we can't raise a large amount, to do things in sections. So that's one of the things we've planned a meeting for next week to talk about those things.
And do you have a sense that there's any potential difficulty in terms of prioritizing? Or are there not, is it just the two that we've talked about and not others that you're aware of in terms of what gets funding first?
Well, people have talked about a lot of things. What I personally have heard most about lately is the parking area.
Right.
So that's what I was thinking about, but was that Heba Mazur's district over
Yes.
there? And then she moved around, and I kind of lost focus on that.
Can I suggest again that we not get too far afield? We've got other members of the Arts and Humanities Commission here who probably want to talk to us about many of these same things. And the two commissioners in front of us, I know, are extremely knowledgeable, but I can also have the sense that the other members who are sitting behind them are jumping up and down wanting to get into the conversation. And I don't want to get too far afield. And maybe we could have Joy, and then we can move on.
This is a great conversation. I'm really glad that the Arts and Humanities Commission is coming to talk with us tonight as a whole. And the only thing I will point out is how fun it is to do these interviews and to look yet again at your resumes and to see all the things that you do. And Diana, you highlighted the way that you tie together many different community pieces. And Alice, I noticed from your resume that I did not know this about you. 1988 television guest for the Phil Donahue Show. See, I mean, this is what, kind of brings a little levity to some Dry City business. And so I appreciate you being here, and I do look forward to the conversation we'll have later.
I was supposed to be after Doug way back there, but I got lost. I wanted to ask you, in terms of an interview question, if you had any ideas about getting art out into the broader community, because you have talked a lot about the community center, but I think maybe I would like people to consider that question, and maybe the whole committee could respond after the break, because I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that. And I think at that same time, too, I'll share my other idea that I have. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for the interviewees at this point? I think since we've already sort of disrupted the agenda to this point, are there other people coming for the Arts and Humanities Commission other than the two of you?
We expected a couple, but with the change in the schedule tonight, we were expecting folks closer to around 9.
Okay, all right. Well, then let's go ahead and do it at 9, so you'll have all the folks here that you want to have here. So let's then, thank you both very much, and I'm very pleased that both of you want to continue with the Arts and Humanities Commission. We have the final item on our regular meeting agenda this evening is a resolution providing an appointment to the Health Services Impact Committee. This is an individual who has been interviewed, and so the resolution this evening is just to do the appointment, so that I believe we're now caught up on people who are eligible for appointment. Would someone like to make?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is any council comments? Any public comments? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution passes.
Is the committee going to be meeting soon? Do we know?
We can probably find out that information. I don't believe we know what their current plan is.
I have people asking me.
I believe that Benita George is going to be working with the committee, and she's been in contact with members, been working to contact members to set up an informal get-together for her first meeting. So she's looking for a good date.
Thank you.
Okay. We're running a bit ahead of schedule. I would like to offer the council a couple of options. One would be that we take a short break and then come back, probably reverse the order of our two last items, since I think the Arts and Humanities Commission was expecting some people around 9. The other thing that we could do, if the council wants, is to continue on with the items we've got in front of us, and then if we're not yet at 9 o'clock, to take a break at that point. What would the council's pleasure be?
I'm fine to plow forward.
Move forward at this point? Okay. Let me ask the Deputy City Manager, in terms of the process of convening a council compensation committee, do we need additional staff members here to talk about that item?
No.
Okay. I think what we'll do is then we will take up item number 9, which is the discussion for the process of convening the council compensation committee. and then save the last item for when the remaining members of the Arts and Humanities Commission arrive. This was put on the agenda because the recommendation of the last Council Compensation Committee was that the next one should take place in, I believe it was 2007. But if we would like to get this done well ahead of the elections next year, the notion was that we could go ahead and make a decision on what we're going to do in 2006 and then go ahead and implement it in 2007. And I assume that the questions in front of us would be along the lines of, how we want to set the committee up, who would be on it. A recommendation actually was included in the code the last time was the fact that it would be city residents every 4 years, beginning with 2007, and that it follow the principles of compensation that were laid out by the first committee, and that the effective date of the salary adjustment, which is actually carried over from the previous code, would be following the election of the next council. So those are the things that are in code, but there's a number of items that aren't addressed in the code that the council would have to make a decision about. Is there anything you wanted to add, Jesse?
Well, there are two issues. One is the setting a timeline, and the other issue is to determine how members of the committee should be recruited and selected. When council formed the committee last time, I believe there weren't interviews. There wasn't an advertising process, I don't think. I'm not sure. Well, and I don't remember either at this point. I don't think there was.
I think we might have each come forward with someone.
I think that's how it was done. And so if we need to advertise for these positions, it would be helpful to know that sooner rather than later.
I think I saw Bruce's hand, and then, was it Terry? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we should advertise for this, and I think we should make it clear that we would welcome input from a broad spectrum of people, while at the same time I think it would be helpful that we state an intention that we want to have at least a couple of people who have served on the council on the committee as a source of information and background.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. As a member of the last Council Compensation Committee, my recollection is that these principles of compensation were left to be open for any future committee to review and revise as they deem appropriate. But, and I may be wrong, we may want to check back on the minutes of those.
I think they recommended, I mean, it is in the code, and my recollection is that they suggested that future, I mean, obviously there could be changes, but they recommended this as a guideline for.
Right, I think that you're right, guideline.
Yeah.
Is the word I recall. But as a member of that committee, I expressed concern during the meetings that we had almost all prior council members on the committee, and which led me to believe that maybe it wasn't just one member from each ward nominating someone for the committee. It looked like there was a concerted effort in the last time to have past council members.
Yes, there was.
And I think that's good to have that past experience, but I think I would like to see maybe some non-council members, some people without that experience too, to give a different perspective.
Okay. So we agree.
Colleen?
Have you ever considered getting a different perspective by getting somebody who's been a council person but not Tacoma Park, or somebody from the municipal league to participate?
I think what we were fortunate, I think the last time, to have a lot of information that was pulled together by one of the members of the committee on what other municipalities paid their council members, and I think that's sort of what we did. It was limited to residents of Tacoma Park, if the council thought it was important, we could try and get someone who was a council member or former council member from another municipality. I'm not sure exactly how we would go about recruiting that person. We did try and have that perspective incorporated through the wealth of information on what compensation other members of other councils received. And as a matter of fact, there was a fairly extensive statistical analysis, which
Including multiple regression.
Right, including a lot of ways of looking at what typical or average salaries might be according to a number of factors, population, budget, that sort of thing.
What I remember about this is that the council salaries had not been increased in a long time. I think it says here 1989. So when I brought this up as a new council member in 2001, it was kind of a risky proposition. So the fact that we had multiple people who had been council members, I think, was to allow that to proceed cautiously. Now that they came back to us and we codified what their recommendations were, I think this time around it would make sense to have more of a mix, and but I would think that mix would be limited to Tacoma Park residents, given that they're the ones who have to contemplate running for council, whereas someone who lives in College Park
they're the ones who
doesn't.
would pay the council.
Well, exactly. They're the taxpayers, and they're in the population of people eligible to run for council. Would it make sense to include other people? I'm sure an argument could be made that it would make sense from one perspective or another, but I feel that it's most relevant to advise us as council members. We've already taken the plunge. We know what the council salary is, and we run for office and we serve. The people who are in the community that are not in that position, I would like to hear from them. What would prompt you to think this was more of a viable endeavor for, anyone in our community to do, to undertake? So I kind of agree with the previous comments, but do think that it makes sense to limit it to Tacoma Park residents.
Where I think we are in terms of what we've talked about so far is that there seems to be some agreement that we should advertise, and that the council should, the committee should be made up of a mix of people, including perhaps one or two former council members, but not all former council members. I don't know how people feel on including somebody from another municipality, but I think we should maybe talk about that and then get to the timeline. But I'm not hearing any opposition to the notion of including a mix of people, including former council members, but not exclusively former council members. Bruce?
Yeah, I think something that might address the concern that Colleen was getting at is that I think last time a bunch of information was gleaned from Jim Peck at MML, and I think one of the first orders of business is going to go back to him or whoever might be covering that area now, and seeing what they're aware of in any trends in other municipalities, if anything has changed or if it's just incremental, and any possible reason to go out with any wider search for anything. I think that inquiry will give us any information we might need to pursue anything beyond just residents.
Terry?
Yeah, as I recall during the meetings of the previous compensation committee, there was certainly a lot of discussion about, what do other municipalities did pay, and gathered a lot of information. We were fortunate enough to have mathematicians on the committee, so a lot of work was done in that regards. But I think there was at least an equal amount of discussions focusing on the philosophical reasons for paying more or less to council members. And that is an area that I think maybe as now the compensation level is closer to the range of what other municipalities pay, it may be mathematically slightly low, slightly higher than other municipalities. I think the real work is going to come into the philosophical discussion of, do we attract better or worse council members by paying more? Are we attracting people to run for office? Are we attracting the wrong people for the wrong reasons if we pay more? I think that's where a lot of the discussion is going to end up, and so I think that's just something to keep in mind as we make our appointments. But it again speaks for having a wider mix than what we had in the past.
Can I just, in addressing the things that I'm hearing people say, in terms of, we've been talking basically about how members are recruited and selected. I think we seem to have, well, actually, four things here that I've noted. One is that we should advertise. The second is that we should include people other than council members as well as former council members, that it should be limited to city residents, but that the committee should be charged with getting the information on what other municipalities pay their council members and their mayors. In some cases, they're different, and use that information in their consideration. Is that where we are in terms of that? What about a timeline?
I think what Jesse has recommended here looks very workable, and it would necessitate putting if we did do the notice in the newsletter to advertise the vacancy, that it would need to happen soon so that appointments could be made in November, December. But then committee reporting back to council in April 2007, ordinance adopting salary adjustments in May 2007, and then none of the changes taking effect until after the new mayor and council took office. All of that sounds like a reasonable time frame.
I think the last piece is actually in the ordinance, and so we're obligated to do that. Does anybody have a problem with the recommended time frame that Jesse pulled together? And my assumption is that that would require you to start advertising for this committee fairly soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Will there be any, will you conduct interviews?
We probably should, I think. Yeah. Last time, most of the members of the council were already acquainted with the people who were selected. So perhaps we didn't feel that that was necessary. I don't remember, but yeah. I do remember, and I just realized this, I do remember that one of the reasons we appointed former council members is we also didn't want, we thought it was sort of awkward of putting people in the position of setting salaries for council members and the mayor if they were contemplating running for council or the mayor. That put them in an odd position that they would be recommending their own salaries. And so one of the notions was that if we appointed former council members, then they were probably the only people in the city who probably weren't in that boat. Of course, we were wrong even in that. So, but that was, I do remember a consideration that we were looking for people who had been there, done that, and wouldn't be doing it again. But as always the case, one never achieves perfection. Okay, so if we're comfortable with the timeline, if we're comfortable with the notion that the position should be advertised, they should go to city residents, that they should include both former council members and non-former council members, and that the committee should, part of the charge of the committee should include looking at the data for other municipalities, and that we follow the timeline that Jesse suggested, which means that the advertisements start fairly soon. And that we would have to go ahead and recruit, go ahead and interview the appointments, people who want to be appointed. Okay. Might I suggest at this point that we take a very brief recess and come back for the final item on the agenda, at which point we should have the remainder of the members of the Arts and Humanities Commission.
Yes.
And also noting for the record that the Arts and Humanities Commission is not late, we are early. Right on time. Back, and as I said, we've slightly reordered our agenda so that the item we have before us at this point is the annual report of the Arts and Humanities Commission. And with apologies to the commissioners who are here that we got a little bit into this prior to their arrival, but as I said, you should feel free to cover whatever items you'd like to cover.
Well, great. Thank you, Mayor Porter, City Council. Good evening. My name is Emily Schillingberg-Paulus, and I'm the chair of the Tacoma Park Arts and Humanities Commission, and it is my pleasure and delight to meet with you this evening to provide an annual update to the City Council and to the community on the Arts and Humanities Commission activities. First, I'd like to introduce the representatives from the Commission that are with me.
I'm Jose Dominguez. I'm the Vice Chair for the Commission.
I'm Karen Liffenbach, the Secretary of the Commission.
I'm Ashley Sims, who we hope will continue to serve on the Commission. They are two dynamos that we are very fortunate to work with. Just by a little history, the Arts and Humanities Commission was established by City Council in 2003 to advise the city on all matters related to the arts and humanities, such as promoting, coordinating, and strengthening public programs to further the cultural development of the city. The Commission is comprised of 15 committee members, all appointed by City Council, who each serve 3-year terms. We are very blessed with an amazing group of distinguished volunteers who bring their professional experience and expertise to focus on community-oriented cultural opportunities for Tacoma Park. Commissioners include those working with national, regional, and local cultural organizations and government agencies, as well as being independent artists and scholars. The Commission includes visual artists, musicians, writers, educators, archivists, historians, anthropologists, and arts advocates. I so enjoy working with this amazing group who are so generous with their energy, creativity, time, and organizational skills, which they dedicate to building and supporting a thriving cultural community in Tacoma Park. In June 2005, City Council adopted Creative Vision, a cultural plan for Tacoma Park. And this document is a result of community-based research to identify the cultural needs and priorities within our community, and has served as our policy to guide our programs and initiatives. The plan includes 3 core values, which emphasize building a creative community, supporting artists and scholars, and celebrating our rich cultural diversity. Specific areas of focus include outreach, education and programs, making use of facilities and venues, public art programs such as murals, and funding opportunities to enrich art production and outreach. Over the last year, the Commission has worked to implement the plan with both public programs and internal policy development to establish a strong footing for future initiatives and partnerships. To publicize the ideas and goals of the cultural plan to key stakeholders and community members, we made the cultural plan available on the city's website, and a summary was distributed in the Tacoma newsletter, as well as we distributed at the farmers market and our various community festivals. To solicit new ideas and to identify potential partners and volunteers, the Commission has hosted 2 public forums this year. Both were a great success, with a total of 35 people participating in an open discussion on the cultural values, priorities, and interests in the community. The Commission heard a lot of fantastic ideas that will help shape specific priorities and programming over the next few years. Our beautiful community center offers a new and exciting opportunities for the community to engage and participate in the arts and humanities, and this building has been a focus for a lot of our energies and programs. Perhaps the most visible and visual, pardon the pun, arts and humanities program this year is development of the exhibitions program here in this building. Thanks to the assistance of Councilmember Williams, the support of all of the council, the amazing logistical assistance from city staff, the Commission has transformed several public spaces into 2 exhibition galleries. Our inaugural exhibition featured 50 artists living in or working in Tacoma Park. It's a diverse show featuring a variety of media, including photography, paintings, printmaking, and sculpture. In keeping with the inclusive approach for the community center, this exhibition was open to all who submitted and set the stage for an open invitation for future exhibitions. Since the grand opening of the Community Center in December, the Commission has facilitated 1 to 3 exhibitions each month. Exhibitions have featured the works of local, regional, national, and international artists, providing local artists an opportunity to show their work and for the community to engage with the beautiful, striking, and thought-provoking pieces. The May exhibition, presented by the Tacoma Artists Guild, entitled Journeys of the Heart, presented the work of this local group, continuing an important tradition of TAG providing exhibitions in Tacoma Park. The arts and humanities provide a media and focus for presentation and exchange of ideas and cultures. As I mentioned, we have featured some international artists, such as our March show by Turkish women entitled For Women by Women. These portrait and scenic photographs were beautiful, haunting, and uplifting, and provided a lens to see the world through another's eyes. This traveling show incidentally appeared in London, Turkey, and in Tacoma Park, Maryland. The arts and humanities also provide opportunity for communities to reflect, react, and comment on important issues. One of the exhibitions presented in June, entitled Faces of War, a Peace Memorial, featured a large grid wire installation hung with handmade dog tags holding the faces of U.S. soldiers who have died in the current Iraq War. The work was created by a group of students in California who objected to the war and used the visual arts to express their opposition to the significant loss of life. In conjunction with the exhibition, the artists, activists, students provided a presentation of their work with a discussion, and were joined by poets from the D.C. Poets Against the War and Beltway Poetry Quarterly. It was an important and thought-provoking event that provided our community opportunity to discuss and reflect on the war and the current conflict. The Commission for the Building and Expanding the Exhibitions Program has developed standards and guidelines to help community groups organize successful exhibitions in the community center. These guidelines provide information on how to organize a show, from locating and selecting the artwork to the actual installation, and how to publicize and market the event. This program has been a smashing success, and because of that, the Commission established an exhibitions director honorary position to serve as a community curator and coordinator of exhibits. The exhibitions director will receive an honorarium and will provide technical guidance to exhibitions, ensure an ongoing and varied exhibition schedule, and curate one show of their own artistic or scholarly interest. Ms. Stephanie Ney is our first community exhibitions director. She was selected in June. She has a Master of Fine Arts and is an accomplished artist, curator, educator, and arts administrator. We are just delighted and honored to be working with her this year to build and expand the quality of our exhibitions program at the Community Center. Finally, a final note on the exhibitions program. The Commission has acquired additional furnishings and hardware to expand the usable exhibition space in the community center, including the third floor atrium and the hallway leading into the library. So we'll have 2 more spaces. Another popular and successful program has been the poetry program, coordinated by Tacoma Park's own poet laureate, Don Berger. Don is an accomplished poet and educator who has published 2 collections of poetry, appeared in numerous magazines and journals, and teaches at the University of Maryland and at Montgomery College. Don has organized and hosted poetry readings held on the second Thursday of each month, and these events have been a smashing success with talented, inspiring local and regional poets drawing 20 to 30 members of our community to each event. Incidentally, the open mic poetry night is one of the most popular, showing that Tacoma Park residents enjoy being on stage just as much as they love being in the audience. For the 2000 series, the Commission is soliciting poets and entries and asks for submissions by October 11th. That's a little marketing plug. Don also authored a new piece for the community entitled City Forever, which he read at the grand opening and is now available for all to read online on the city's website. Don is continuing work on a community-authored piece collecting lines from residents at various local events, including the Folk Festival yesterday. He got one from me, my husband, which he will organize and compile to share later in the year. And this will be a poem by all of the members of our community. Now, moving out of the community center and to focus in and around our community, which is something that council members raised during interviews, the Arts and Humanities Commission has been developing a public art trust initiative, which is much modeled on the county's program. In June of last year, June 2005, City Council approved the Tacoma Park Public Art Process Plan, and the Commission has been working to finalize details to establish an advisory committee specific to the Arts and Humanities Commission that will focus on public arts projects, including logistics, funding, and those kinds of details. So this group will essentially be a committee made up of local and regional experts who have a lot of experience in public art projects, including building, maintenance, funding, safety issues, and so on, so that the Commission really has a strong body of experts to advise us when council or the community has a public art project for us to consider. An important public project will be the concrete facing at the community center, and as Alice mentioned, we're going to be meeting next week to flesh out some initial details. The meeting will probably include mostly Commission members, but we will be opening that committee up and soliciting guidance and expertise from members of our community. Also on the topic of working in and around the community and taking advantage of big events coming to our community in December, the Commission is planning an open studio tour and holiday art sale, something that has been a strong interest from some members of the City Council. The open studio tour and holiday sale will be planned for Saturday, December 16th, capitalizing on the Tacoma Adventist Church Big Nativity event that will be ongoing. The studio tour will provide an opportunity for artists to present and sell their works, and for the community to view and purchase local artwork. Artists with studio space in Tacoma Park will be invited to open their studios for the day and will be included in a map brochure and the other marketing materials. For those without a studio space, artists will be invited to set up booths at the community center. So once again, we're trying to draw events in and around Tacoma Park business communities in the neighborhoods, and also bringing people back to the community center as a community focal point. As I mentioned, one of our core duties is to serve as an advisor to the City Council, and we have worked hard to meet the City Council's needs and requests for guidance and to coordinate various things. For example, for the fiscal year 2006 city budget, the city provided a one-time commitment of $2,000 to a seed money to establish a film festival director position. The Commission served as the city's advisor by working with the 2005 Film Festival Committee to develop a position description for the director position, establish a hiring process, and transparent criteria for hiring. We are thrilled with the selection of Ms. Agnes Moon, a filmmaker, film preservation specialist, and curator. Plans are well underway for a fantastic 2006 film festival. Another issue that was brought to the Commission seeking advice was to look for ways to expand and improve performance space in the community center. Commissioners have met with the Recreation Committee, city staff, and with city council members to discuss ways to utilize, for example, the city council chambers as a venue. The Commission looks forward to the ongoing discussion and planning to maximize the use of this space. Other projects in the development, we hope in the next month or so to have our website up, with the Tacoma Park website, and we're exploring the logistics for establishing an online community gallery with images, text, sound, and video clips, provide a digital gallery for the community to present and experience various artistic forms. As Diana mentioned, we're also continuing collection of names and contact information to create a cultural directory, which we hope to have out in the next few months to post in partnership with the Tacoma Voice. At some point in the future, it would be nice to do a print version, modeled something similar to what the county has done in other communities, with a list of all of the cultural events, places, people in the community with maps and so on. Partnerships are key to a coordinated and sustained community engagement and fulfilling the goals of the cultural plan. The Commission will continue to reach out to the community to develop new initiatives to support thriving cultural community. Over the next, looking forward, we're looking towards reaching out into specific neighborhoods, building partnerships with the business community, such as OTBA. We've had initial conversations about utilizing empty storefronts and putting exhibitions in the storefronts, and working with some of the stores to do window displays. We've only been in existence for 3 years. We've had a lot of fun, and we've worked very hard, and we're grateful for the ongoing support and encouragement from the City Council, and we look forward to continuing this work for many years to come. With that said, I hope that I covered lots of things that were brought up during the interviews, but I would also welcome any additional questions that you have.
Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you for that wonderful report. I guess the reaction that I have is the reaction we've had in the past, which is you all are doing a wonderful job. The variety of things and the level of quality in what you've done has just been very, very wonderful and very appropriate for the kinds of things that we have in the city. I also wanted to just say a couple of things. You have done such a fantastic job at the artwork that has been shown in the city building, the community center. I'm in and out of this building a lot, and almost every time I come in this building, I see somebody sort of wandering around looking at the pictures, and very often it's someone who came in the building for something else and starts looking at the art and thinking, oh, and I see them just sort of wandering down some hall, which isn't on its way to their destination, but just looking at the art on the walls and, you know, just admiring the richness of the art that we've got in the city. So it has certainly been very successful, and maybe it actually gives you an opportunity to have the artwork seen by people who maybe they're on their way to pay a bill at the city or pick up their child at an event, and they end up, you know, noticing the art and appreciating the variety of arts that people in Tacoma Park are aware of. So I really think that that has been very, very successful among many of the other things that you do.
Well, that was quite an impressive list of activities. You guys are really very busy. You must love your jobs. I had 3 comments. The first one is that I was happy to hear about all the things about art in the community, and I think art can be very community defining. I wonder if you've ever considered art as traffic calming.
Oh yes, one of my favorite topics is art in art in transportation contexts.
Okay.
I had a dream at one point when I was standing at a bus stop with no sidewalk and no overhang or a trash can, and I thought, we could bring the arts and have, you know, cool bus shelters, which they do in a lot of communities. But I agree with you that in traffic calming, on my street, Elm Street, which parallels 410, even though we have all these speed humps, we get speed demons down there. And I think that using art as a traffic calming device is a fantastic idea, and something that we could definitely talk about, and we would look to the city staff too, to sort of figure out the logistics of such a thing, to work up a project. Did you have any particular areas in mind?
Well, there's been some ideas for a traffic circle at Lincoln and Elm, and someone from the Environmental Committee thinks it would be a great place for a white oak tree, and some of the folks in the community think it would be a great place for some public art. So, but I was just thinking about it because I've been thinking about the challenges of how we're going to communicate to people who want to cut through our neighborhoods that they're entering a neighborhood, and one of the things is really claiming the neighborhood, and part of that is, landscaping and upkeep. Part of it is also art. It says, hey, you're entering a special place, and we care about it enough that we're going to put out this artwork, and it's going to be reflective of our community. And if they slow down to look at it, that's great too, but it also sends a signal like you're entering a different kind of a space now. So that was thing number one, art. Art is traffic calming. Thing number two is Forest Park mural. Forest Park folks are really interested in having a mural on that blank wall there that's at the end of, I think it's Conway and Prince George's. And we talked about it a little bit in the budget process this year, but they've been talking about it for a couple years. And I know that they've gotten some support, and I just wanted to mention it again to maybe keep it on the front burner instead of the back burner. And the third thing is that I'm probably one of the few people when someone said, hey, have you seen the moat down at the community center? And I said, moat, and I thought, art. And the reason is because I went to school at UC Santa Cruz. I got all excited about the idea of a moat because I went to school at UC Santa Cruz where I think it was, it's been too many years since I've been there, but I think it was Crown Merrill College, had a moat. And what they did with their moat was they divvied up the space along the moat for murals. And every quarter, they lotteried out the spaces to the artists in the college, who then came and they painted pictures on their space of the moat. And then at the end of the quarter, they'd have a vote, and they'd get their little applause meter out, and everyone would gather around, and they would vote. And I think 1/3 of the murals would, or they had some percentage of the murals that would stay, and then the others would be turned over, and they would whitewash them, and then they would lottery out the rest of them. And some of the murals, a couple of them had been there for several years, and some would stay around as long as they were relevant and reflective of the community. But it was one of the things that I loved the most about UC Santa Cruz was the moat. If there are other UC Santa Cruz students in Tacoma Park, and I'm sure that there are, I'm sure they could give you fond memories and their favorite drawings from the moat. So
I think that's a wonderful idea and something for us to talk about as we sit down and talk about murals at the community center. There's a lot of things to figure out. Longevity of the work is one. There are, as you described, murals that are meant to be up for only a little while, and then the plan is that another mural, there'll be another event, another set of artists will come in and do something new, versus, well, are we going to do something that the intended goal is for it to be up 5 years or, have a longer longevity. But I think that's a really interesting idea for us to chat over the possibilities as we move forward and try to figure out exactly what the logistics of this project will be. Thank you.
Bruce and then Joy.
I wanted to take a second. Can I borrow that piece of paper? I just wanted to let you know that. No, I just want to let you know that you all inspire art even when you're here tonight by our resident caricatures.
And you're not allowed to look at it any closer because it's
Oh, can we please have that for the commission archives?
Today's break was terrific.
So anything you can do to help me encourage a little more widespread visibility for his caricatures, I think would be wonderful.
How about the voice?
He was one of the 50
I know.
that were part of
But
the
he does caricatures up here all the time, and nobody ever gets
I've
to
been
see
outed.
them. And I think we need to get some of them circulated.
Maybe we should talk to Stephanie May and maybe do an exhibition of them.
Yes. Maybe an exhibition of cartoon.
I think this is off topic, and
It's not off topic at all.
In the cases are available at this moment. Many opportunities.
And I look forward to continuing to work with the various people who are working to try and make sure that we get performance space in here. I know it's taking longer than anybody wishes or hoped, but I think in the end we'll get a space that works for an awful lot of things.
Just let me follow up for a second on Colleen's comment about the parking area, murals on the parking areas. Some of you know I have a particular request, which is if you can find someone in the community who specializes in generator art. We have a very ugly generator down there, and I would love for it to be transformed through the creativity and artistic expression of someone in Tacoma Park into a classic piece of public art.
without jeopardizing the warrant.
Without jeopardizing any of the operativity of that generator. So, and that's I realize that's quite a challenge, but it's right now large and ugly, and we can't do anything about the large, but I think we could do something about the ugly. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I think it's an important feature to include in our, when we say concrete facing, we really should say parking area. The area at the community center to include that rather large feature.
And I know you all would work with Public Works to make sure that nothing that was done to the generator would hamper its usability. Joy?
Yes, I do want to take this opportunity, as always, to thank you. You all are doing terrific work, and we really do appreciate it. On the idea of art in traffic calming, I'm so glad Colleen brought that up. I think it's a terrific idea. And one, I've heard a couple of ideas on the traffic circles, certainly a great opportunity there at Lincoln and Elm. And I believe the council funded that project in the current budget. So hopefully we'll see progress on that soon. Another idea I've heard about is at speed limit signs, having little community-derived artwork on speed limit signs so that there's, at this kind of mundane point in the city. I'm sure we couldn't do it on state highways, but we could do it on city roads if the council approved it, is to have art pieces that, kind of went with the speed limit sign. And since traffic calming is really about safety and also slowing down to enjoy life as we're living it, I think that it would be an appropriate way to express that. And I would leave it to you all to think about that further. But I believe there's a city that has tried this, and I just don't recall which city it is. I believe there's something on the web about it as a larger scale project than just being an idea. Let's see, one opportunity for a mural project that might be smaller scale than what you're looking at with the community center is over on Westmoreland Avenue near Carroll, where previously we thought that the new owners were going to undertake a big renovation over there. Now it looks like they're going to keep what they have and just continue renting office space. And so there's this one building that when I spoke with them, they seemed receptive, interested in having beautified by the community, and it's where there's a big blank wall right on the sidewalk. It's right across from the park, and it's a canvas if you ever saw one. So that's something I'll leave you with, and I'm really thrilled that you've set a date for the art studio tour, and I'm looking forward to that. I hope that you have all the help that you need, and please do call on us and anyone you need as that moves forward. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is about the murals that were done as part of the community center project. I've been asked by people what happened to them, whether they're available for sale. I don't know if you thought about maybe having an auction and raising money for public art, but let me know where that stands.
Okay, well, just for the viewing audience, I'll say that they are safely stored in Tacoma Park, and the commission has been talking about what to do with them, and one of the, it was hard when they came down, I'll be honest, it was hard, but I knew it was necessary. But we have been talking about doing some kind of auction, some sort of fundraising event that we can use them for, and that will probably occur sometime in the next year.
The Sligo Creek
Oh, yeah.
photo
Yeah,
was installed at Sligo Creek Elementary, so
right.
some of this, I think there's issues that have to do with proprietary interest on certain of the murals, but again, that's an ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
Right,
We
I
should
was
go out
lucky
and
enough.
Get permission and ensure that, I haven't looked at the agreement, it's been a while since that we did that project, but we would of course go and get the permission of the artist before we did that and make sure that we were free and clear to.
I was lucky enough to be at that Sligo Creek picture installation at Sligo Creek Elementary School, and the community of students loved it. There were some parents there. Marty Ittner, who was the artist who silkscreened the photograph, was there. The photographer was there. It was really a neat event. So I know they're thrilled to have it, and anyone can see it.
I just to add one thing to something that both Colleen and Joy have mentioned about art as sort of traffic calming. I think that's a great idea. You should probably also work with the Safe Roadways Committee, because I know they have spent a lot of time and thought on what kinds of things would improve pedestrian safety and calm traffic. And they would very likely have some thoughts, and anything in that area you should probably work with them on.
Well, and a wonderful potential partner, and one that we didn't have on our list, and now we do.
Okay. Carrie, I think you had a question.
Thank you, yes. And since we've, Colleen brought that up, as I think every politician knows, one of the top, if not the top issue in every community is traffic, whether it be the traffic control, too much traffic, whatever. And so, I think we all would jump on the traffic calming because it's a new idea. It's something that maybe will solve the problem we haven't been able to solve in any other way. And I really admire the work that you all do, and I'm serious. Whether it be the art exhibits out here, the signs that you were just talking about during the construction, the tiles on the wall in the other room, or just the classes that go on. It's art and the poetry. I mean, it's all impressive. So I certainly wouldn't tell you how to do things, but I will tell you that I like to see quick action rather than lots of planning. And so I would tell you that the Ritchie Citizens Association would love to have you come and use Ritchie Avenue as a test area for traffic calming through art. And I think I can speak for many of my neighbors who have spoken to me about the traffic issues that they are ready to help in any way they can. Okay, and that's a serious offer. I just want to mention this festival up at the holidays in Old Town just real quickly, and my fear is that people don't see it in the same potential that I'm thinking that it is. The church is talking about a lot of outside people visiting our city during the Christmas time, during the time that the church is putting on the live nativity scene. And that is a huge opportunity for the businesses up there, but it's a huge opportunity for the city. And I think that that there may be some need for planning and for resources from the city, and I don't see anyone taking the lead in letting us know what it is that you need. And we talked briefly in the hallway outside during the break, but there are such issues as parking needs, that we know that the Old Town area doesn't have a wealth of parking. It's something that certainly the church is going to be addressing, but an area where we could be working with the business association and the church to come up with ideas of, do we shuttle bus people from another location to provide for more ample parking? Are there decorations that are needed in the street? Who should be coordinating for activities at the gazebo or other locations throughout the Old Town area, again, so that we can make this a neighborhood-wide festivity and not just a church activity and not just a business activity, not a loosely coupled activity between a couple of organizations, but something where there's a cohesiveness to the whole neighborhood when people come to visit. And we may find that next year they come not just to visit whatever the church is doing, but they would be coming to see Old Town Tacoma because it was a neat place to shop in the holiday time. So I'm searching for that entity that's going to take take the initiative to see if we can't bring some cohesion to that festivity.
Well, as Alice mentioned earlier, I know that the various groups have been talking. I think we now just need to lock ourselves in a room together and work out all of the logistics and what each group's part is.
Silence.
Yeah. I mean, I am thinking about some things like parking and, what's the role of the Tacoma Police in this, and how far, and the commission is very focused on getting the studio tour event and the artists lined up, the space here, doing all the appropriate marketing and getting our map together and so on. The marketing is a place where the three groups, I think we're envisioning to sort of team up together, but I think we've really heard, and the community's heard, that there is a concern on okay, how is all of this going to come together? And the church is in the district, right? So it's right over the line.
The church is actually on the Maryland side, but the activity itself, their live nativity scene is going to be in their parking lot, which is on the DC side of the line.
So there's some cross-jurisdictional.
But we are the same neighborhood, and I think that's the important thing to understand. And I also think 3 months is not a lot of time left to get this thing completely organized. And I also, as much as I love our government, I don't think that a government entity should be the organization that actually brings it together. I think we need to have a group of volunteers that do that, and then ask for the assistance of the government where it's needed, such as the police or whatever. Thank you.
And if I can just add on to that, when I realized tonight the scope of that project, I made a quick call during the break to the president of the neighborhood association that's going to be most affected by this to say there needs to be some coordination there, because there's the potential for a lot of traffic impacts on the neighborhood. So I want to make sure that they're in on any of the information that needs to get to them, and that they can have an opportunity to provide some feedback, because I know if that doesn't happen, there may be some difficulties.
Just one thing I wanted to add. I'm glad the mayor remembered to mention Safe Roadways Committee, because they really do think a lot about traffic calming. They've also come to us with proposals for bus shelters, and I think your idea about enhancing bus shelters so they're actually a really nice place to stand and look around. I'm embarrassed to say, but Bethesda has a great model for us to take a look at, and it's our own Bodil Mullaney that designed the benches. And the shelter itself is lovely, and then the artistic bench there is, I can't say enough good things about it. And since she's no longer on the Arts Commission, I feel free to plug her skills as a sculptor. Bus shelters, I did want to emphasize what you had said your interests were. I think that's a terrific direction for the city to support, and I hope you'll come back to us with any more specifics you have. Doug?
Well, first I'd like to invite you over to my side of town. In Ward 6 in the New Hampshire area, we seem to be depressingly devoid of art over there, and we could use some. So I don't know if geography is in your plan or one of the lenses that you look through when you consider these things, but you might consider it being in the future. And the second thing, I grumbled earlier about other areas of the county getting designations or designating themselves to be arts center. But I see now through your report that slowly we are becoming one, although the awareness of it, both within the town and in the surrounding area, is maybe not as great as it should be, and it will be. And I think someone mentioned visibility earlier, and this is such an important thing, is to have these events with the visibility that they deserve over time, so that people get the message in the surrounding area that Tacoma Park is a place, not just for trees, not just for progressive politics or nuclear free zone, but it really is a community of the arts. And then the other comment would be a lot of the emphasis seems to be on decorative and other kinds of arts, fine arts, and certainly it would be good to see a little bit more on the performing side, particularly with the music, which we already have a pretty strong reputation. And it might be interesting to think about things like, the best of the Tacoma Park Folk Festival. So it's not just an annual event that everyone looks forward to, but maybe we can get a little fix more frequently on a smaller scale. And then, of course, the other issue is about lack of performing spaces. But it seems to me that we do have these churches, such as the one in Old Town, and there are two over on my side of town. I don't know what the acoustics are like, but I imagine they're better than this wonderful house of music. If that were the case, it might be possible to program things here and there using the churches as venues for the performances that could take place there. But overall, I think we're well on the way to being this arts mecca that I think would be very valuable for the city to have, not only for its residents, but particularly for the business folks who need the income that will come when people arrive here to take in the sights and take in the art. So thanks. Good job.
I just want to recognize one piece of art that I have loved for several years now, and that is one that Alice was part of putting on the New Hampshire Rec Center. But I do agree that area, the commercial area, the residential area is a beautiful palette or canvas for future public art.
If I can just respond, because you both have raised important issues in geography, Councilmember Berry. A lot of our work this year has been to really focus on the use of this new space, because when we did the cultural plan, one of the real needs that was raised was facility and venue, a place to work, present, perform. And with the opening of the community center, we looked for all kinds of ways that we could utilize this space, also recognizing the vision of the community center to be a draw, to a place where community comes together. But over the last several months, we've also been talking more about reaching out into particular neighborhoods, and this is something that was raised specifically at one of our public forum meetings to look at specific neighborhoods, how to take the arts and humanities into particular communities. I agree with you that, I live just around the corner from the section along New Hampshire Avenue. There's wonderful places to eat there, and there are places to go, but I agree that it will be important for the city and the commission to help the city in sort of identifying ways to highlight and feature particular neighborhoods in each of the wards.
Well, I want to thank you for all the wonderful work that you've done over the past 3 years, and you've got some very exciting ideas for future work. And thank you very much for the time and expertise and imagination that you've brought to your work on the Arts and Humanities Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing else, we're adjourned.